Good morning, everyone. So I will, sorry, a little bit of logistics. I will try to introduce a little bit about the government's rules and procedures of IPBES. Next, please. How do I do this? Just green? Okay. So actually, one of the things what one should never forget about IPBES is that it is a science policy interface at the intergovernmental level. Now that has some implications for everything, in fact. And one of the things that is typical about a science policy interface, or one of the, let's say, the major characteristics of science policy interfaces is that they should respond to a number of necessities which have been identified by a European project which is called the Spiral Project. They said that science policy interfaces should be credible. That means, and that is, they should be scientifically credible. That means that the science should be at the best possible level. It should be policy relevant, which means that, well, science for the sake of science is fantastic, but not for in a science policy interface. And this is something which is, as I understand, most of you are from a scientific background, which is quite important, that it has to be politically legitimate. And this has certain implications. As you all know, scientific methodology has its own rules. The same holds for political methodology. And these two methodologies are not the same. So bringing those two together, making sure that both the scientific methodology is applied in the best possible way so that the scientific credibility is maximized is one thing. The same should hold for political legitimacy and the political methodology that leads to this legitimacy. Now, in general, this methodology can be translated as transparency. And transparency means transparency of the process, which means that everything that happens in the process is governed by rules. Now, these rules in IPBES, there are quite a lot of rules. To give you a few examples, there are 22 pages of rules of procedure for the preparation of reports. There are 39 rules only for the way the plenary should work. And I only have 20 minutes to talk. So either I will have to be very, very quick, either I will have to skip a few. I have thought about this question and I thought, well, I will skip a few. So what do we have as governance? Well, the governance is, as you have already known, have heard, IPBES was established in Panama in April 2012. You see at the front, you see the distinguished delegates, including Hans and myself at the front row, who were actually voting there. It was established as an independent intergovernmental body. Every word counts in this sort of texts, and every word has to be very correct and has its own interpretation, which is sometimes not the same interpretation or the same weight that a word has in general speech. So it is an independent body, which means that it is not governed by any other body. It is linked to the United Nations system, but it is independent of what happens there. It is intergovernmental, which means that it's the governments that decide, not the scientists. And that is reflected in the fact that the plenary, its decision-making body, is a body which has members consisting of governments. As with all intergovernmental, or at least most intergovernmental bodies dealing with the environment, decision is made by consensus amongst all members. This has implications in mostly the length of the negotiation process. Reaching consensus amongst countries is not something which is normally done in 5 minutes. And then, well, there are two subsidiary bodies, the Bureau and the Multidisciplinary Expert Panel, and a secretariat. Now, how does it work? The main bodies are the plenary, which is the governing body. That's where the decisions are made. The Bureau is a subsidiary body that advises the chair and the secretariat on the conduct of business. We have the multidisciplinary expert panel, which provides advice and assistance on all technical and scientific needs. And of course, there's a secretariat who does, well, everything that the secretariat normally does. Now, going to the plenary, it's the decision-making body. So the members of this intergovernmental body are governments. And becoming a member of this decision-making body for a government is very simple. A government has to express its intent to become member. And by simply expressing its intent to become member, they become member. At this moment, there are 118 government members of IPBES. The last one that joined IPBES was Zambia. And then, of course, we have observers. The observers are representative of the UN bodies like UNEP, UNESCO, FAO, AUNDP, the four that are most closely linked to the work of IPBES. And then intergovernmental organizations, NGOs, and some governments who have not yet or are not willing to express their intent to become a member of the plenary. Now, the rules to become observer are quite more complicated than the rules to become member of the plenary for a government. In fact, the rules for the admission of observers have not been agreed upon yet. We are working with an interim agreement, and that is quite complicated. As you will see, I have put the words following interim agreement between square brackets. Now, square brackets in policy terms are very, very peculiar things. If something is put between square brackets in an intergovernmental decision, that means that this text has not been agreed upon yet, which means that it still can change. And in an intergovernmental process, this is not without consequence. That means that anybody can still change this text. We will see a few more examples of square brackets further on. So the first plenary took place in Bonn, in Germany, and that is, well, where the first decisions were made. The Bureau was also established during the first plenary in Bonn. It advises the chair, as I already said, and it consists of 10 members, 2 from each UN region, and it includes a chair and 4 vice chairs. Terms of office are 3 years plus a possible prolongation of term for another 3 years. And to give you an idea of the rule governing the candidates for members of the Bureau, that is, candidates for the Bureau will be proposed by governments. We're not sure about whether it's a plural or not. Members, or are they members of the platform, should be distinguished between simple members of plenary or members of the platform, which is different from members of the plenary, and for nomination by regions and elections of by the plenary. So you see, there are pieces of text which within these square brackets, which means, well, people, we don't know yet how the rules are going to end up. Still under discussion. And this is the first IPBES chair, Professor Zachary. This photograph, when he was smiling, was taken just after he was elected chair of the Bureau and before he realized how much work this would take him. The multidisciplinary expert panel is actually the body that takes care of, let us say, the aspects related to the scientific credibility of IPBES work. And already responding a little bit to the question that was asked at the end of for the previous speaker, we are talking about a multidisciplinary expert panel, not about a scientific panel, which means that the members of the MEP can be scientists, but they can also be experts coming from indigenous and local communities, from NGOs, from administration, from policy whatsoever. At least that is the theory. The membership of this multidisciplinary expert panel, there are 25 members, 5 coming from each UN region, and there are a number of observers. Again, the observers, the people from the Bureau are observers to the MEP, multinational environmental agreements scientific bodies. So the chair of the CBD Substar is member of the Bureau. The chair of the UNFCCC Substar is observer to the MEP, etc. The nominations for experts for the MEP are by the UN regions, and they are based on the personal experience of those experts. The election is by the plenary by consensus. And the term of office for the interim MEP, we are not in the final MEP yet, is 2 years, but we hope that in a following meeting of the plenary, we will come to a term of office for members of the MEP of 3 years plus maximum prolongation of 1 term of 3 years, and alternating, which means that there will always be some people on the MEP who have had some experience with the work. Now, I think I have to explain something here which has, again, quite a lot of implications. That is that those UN regions, which is actually a lot of the decisions of the plenary are based on these UN regions. These are actually informal groupings of countries, of governments, that came to being within the UN system as a basis to consult on the nomination of people for offices within the UN system. Now, informal, the word informal at the UN, in the UN system is quite different from what people normally associate with the word informal. It is quite formal. There are 5 groups. There is the African group, Asia Pacific group in red. There is the Eastern European group in red. There is GRULAC, the group of South American and Caribbean countries, and there is the WEOH, the Western European and Others group. The WEOH is what we... Now, if you see the colors on the map, this has grown historically, and it is still reflected in these UN regions. You see that the Eastern European group is what we formally, more or less understood under the East Bloc. The WEOH was the European part of the Western Bloc, plus Canada, Australia, and New Zealand. But nowadays, we have the European Union, which is a bit peculiar. The European Union, in fact, is member of 3 UN regions. 3 UN regions, of course, the WEOH. It is part of the Eastern European group, obviously, and it is part of Asia Pacific, because Cyprus is part of Asia Pacific. So, if you see that these groupings, which are still political at the UN level, may have very dire consequences. There are some other peculiarities. For example, the United States is not a member of WEOH. It is an observer within WEOH. Israel, for example, is part of the WEOH and not of Asia Pacific, where it geographically would more or less fit in. But of course, Israel is a little bit falling outside the general political context of the region in which it geographically fits in. And then we have 2 observers. One is the Holy See, the Vatican, and one is Palestine. And then there is finally one who's not member of anything, that is Kiribati. But what is important here is that nominations for the Bureau, for the MEP, are being done through these regions and not through any of the more recent or political supranational entities that, well, at least we in Europe have come to appreciate MEPs. Another thing is, if we talk about regional assessments, it is these regions that still at this point are being considered. And of course, everybody with a scientific background knows and sees immediately that these UN regions perfectly reflect biogeographical reasons. So, just to show you that, getting the policy relevant regions, these UN regions which are politically relevant, to communicate with the biological ecosystem services related regions is not quite easy. Now, if we look at what rules we have rules on membership and functioning of the Bureau, membership and functioning of the MEP, rules of procedure for meetings of the plenary, that's 39 rules alone, that one alone. The process for making requests, inputs and suggestions, the process for developing the work program, some procedures already for the preparation of the platform deliverables, that's 22 pages, and financial and budgetary agreements. What we don't have agreement on, and this is again a not exhaustive list, is the admission of observers, procedures including especially the clearance programs for deliverables and the stakeholder engagement strategy. Now, if I look through the report of the last IPBES plenary, I see 43 instances where there are square brackets. And that's a lot. Everybody who has ever attended one of those meetings know that lifting a square bracket can take hours and days of discussion. And never are these discussions idle, of course, because they're political discussions. Now, allow me to have a quick look at what procedures we have at this moment for the preparation of the platform's deliverables, because these procedures are the ones that are actually going to make sure that the product of a scientific process, that is the preparation of the assessments, can be taken up in the political process, which is the decision-making body, and can be accepted in as a political decision. This is actually the procedures which rule the science policy interface, the real interface between the scientific project and a political product, the ultimately adopted assessment coming out of IPBES. Now, for these rules, there's 22 pages, as I said, and I'm not going to go rule by rule. We would be here still tomorrow. So I'm just going to give you a short overview to give you an indication of how it looks like. The first thing which we have is definitions. Now, definitions are very, very, very important because we all have to agree on what we talk about and how we interpret each and every thing. So there is definitions on the governance structures. What exactly do we understand under the Bureau? What exactly do we understand under, etc., etc. There are definitions on the deliverables. What is a report? What is an assessment report? A report is not necessarily an assessment report. What is a synthesis report? What is a summary for policymakers? What is a technical summary? What exactly is a technical paper? Etc., etc. And then there is definitions on the clearance process. And this, excuse me. And this is something which is quite similar. If you want to see something working like that, you look at the IPCC process. We have things like validation. What is exactly validation? What is acceptance and who does that? What is adoption and how does it come to be? And what is approval? All these things are different. And then there's an overview of the clearance process for IPBES deliverables. I hope you can read it. You see that for each of these different reports, there is a specified process to have it validated, accepted, adopted, and approved. Now, for example, to give you one example, in most cases, the validation of an assessment will be done by the MEP. So it's scientifically validated by the multidisciplinary expert panel. And then it goes to a decision-making body, mostly the plenary of, or if it is a regional assessment, to the regional part, a regional decision-making body that accepts it. That means, okay, it is here. Voila, that's all. Doesn't say anything about the content yet. Then an assessment can be adopted. Adopted in policy speak means that the governments go through the whole document paragraph by paragraph and accept each paragraph by itself. And then we have approval, which is even worse. That means that the governments go through the whole thing line by line and come to consensus agreement line by line of the document. In an assessment report of 300 pages, this can take a few days. And that is actually the process by which a scientific work gets into a policy process at this intergovernmental level. What do we have more? We have procedures for the preparation of these deliverables. These procedures, as I said, are necessary for the transparency. This is the necessary political methodology to get something accepted. We have procedures for the standard approach for thematic and methodologies assessment. We have different procedures for, or adopted procedures for the fast-track approach for regional, etc., 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 etc. So I hope you forgive me not going through all of these one by one. We have, again, the clearance process for technical papers, which is different than the clearance process for assessments. We have platform supporting material, procedures for workshops, procedures for platform workshops, and procedures for co-sponsored workshops, which are different, because platform workshops are coming from the core budget of IPBES, which means that the plenary has a full say in it. Co-sponsored workshops are slightly different because the funding comes from another source, and that gives problems. That can be problematic. And then we have procedures for the nomination and selection process for task forces, and so forth. And then there are annexes. Annexes are, again, lengthy documents about how things should work. A very important annex, anybody who is involved as an expert in any part of the IPBES work should read this, should know this annex by heart, is on tasks and responsibilities for report co-chairs, coordinating lead authors, contributing authors, review editors, and expert reviewers of the platform reports and other deliverables, and so forth and so forth. As you will see, there's two annexes which are still square bracketed, which means still have to discuss about those. We're not clear about those. No consensus. And those are the procedure of the use of literature in the platform reports. Very important. There has to be a political agreement on the way to do that. And a procedure for recognition and incorporation of indigenous and local knowledge. And that is still yet to be developed. So, I hope that this short overview of the landscape of the complicated landscape of rules give you a short indication of the complexity, not only of the work of IPBES, but also of the governments of IPBES. If you need more information, all these rules are available on the website of IPBES, and if necessary, you can contact the Secretariat of IPBES or our national focal point of IPBES. Hilde, the word is back to you.